I still remember the day I first saw the mansion. It stood on the hill like a silent king, wrapped in glass walls and white stone, overlooking the city that used to belong to my family. The place smelled like money and power. Two things I'd once had, and lost in a single night. When I stepped through those golden gates, dressed in a maid's uniform, I almost laughed. If anyone had told me a year ago that Valeria Grant, heir of the Grant Group, would be scrubbing floors for a man like Ethan Reed, I'd have called them insane. But that's exactly what I was doing. Broom in hand, pretending to be Valerie Gray, the desperate girl who needed a job. Ethan didn't recognize me, of course. Why would he? To him, I was just another faceless servant. But I recognized him. The man who smiled for the cameras when Reed Enterprises acquired my father's company. The man who stood by while my family lost everything. The man whose signature destroyed our name. And now he was my employer. The mansion was full of rules. No eye contact unless spoken to. No speaking unless necessary. No entering the study upstairs. That last rule made me curious. So of course it was the first one I planned to break. Valerie, right? His voice startled me. Deep, calm, too smooth for someone who'd built empires on ruins. I turned, bowing my head the way I'd practiced. Yes, sir. Ethan Reed stood there in a crisp black suit, his tie loosened slightly. Up close, he didn't look like a villain. His dark hair was messy in a way that looked effortless. His eyes, gray, sharp, studied me for a second longer than necessary. You're new, he said. Where did you work before this? I forced a smile. Small hotel in the city, sir. It closed down. Half true. My father's company had owned that hotel. Until Ethan's merger made it vanish. He nodded slowly, then turned away. Do your job well. Don't get involved in things that aren't yours. His tone was calm, but I heard the warning beneath it. I clenched the broom tighter. Yes, sir. That night, I cleaned the marble floors until they gleamed, but my thoughts were far darker. This house was a maze of secrets. I saw men in suits come and go at odd hours, heard whispers from the study door, caught glimpses of Ethan pacing the balcony with a drink in hand. Every night, I wrote in my notebook, the one I hid under my pillow. Names, dates, deals, everything that might one day expose him. But I hadn't planned on the small things. Like the way his expression softened when he talked to the old gardener. Or how he sometimes stayed up late in the library, reading in silence. Or the moment he saw me trip on the stairs and caught me by the wrist. His hand steady, warm. His voice surprisingly gentle. Careful, he said quietly. This place has sharp edges. He didn't let go right away. And for the first time since I entered that mansion, my heart did something dangerous. It hesitated. I pulled back quickly, forcing myself to remember why I was there. To expose him. To take back what he stole. To make Ethan Reed regret ever crossing the Grants. But as I returned to my tiny servant room that night, one thought refused to leave me. What if the man I came to destroy wasn't the monster I thought he was? The mansion felt different after midnight. By day, it was alive with footsteps, orders, and chatter between staff members pretending not to notice the tension that hung over us like fog. But at night, it turned eerily quiet, like the house itself was holding its breath. That's when I liked to move. Every night after my shift, I'd sneak out of the servants' quarters with a small flashlight and my notebook. The hallways smelled faintly of cedar and cologne. Ethan's cologne. I knew because I had accidentally spilled a bottle of it the first week I worked here. He hadn't yelled. He'd only sighed, paid for the damage himself, and told me to slow down next time. It would have been easier if he had been cruel. Monsters are easier to hate when they act like monsters. But Ethan Reed wasn't cruel. He was quiet, guarded, unreadable. And that made him dangerous. I crept down the west hall toward his study, the one room we were forbidden to enter. The door was heavy oak, polished to a shine, with a silver lock that looked brand new. I'd watched enough to know that Ethan kept the key on a chain around his neck. So I did what any smart enemy would do. I waited for my opportunity. Earlier that evening, there had been a dinner party. Important people, big names, luxury cars filling the driveway. I was one of the maids serving wine, moving silently among laughter and crystal glasses. Ethan was hosting, charming in his black tuxedo, smiling politely but never genuinely. And then it happened, A brief moment when he left his seat, setting his napkin on the table. I followed him discreetly toward the hallway, pretending to fetch another tray. He went into the restroom. When he came out, the chain around his neck was slightly visible under his shirt collar. All I needed was a copy. One impression of the key. But before I could move closer, he looked straight at me. "Valerie," he said softly. "Are you following me?" My heart skipped. "No, sir. Just checking if any guests needed water." He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. For a second, I thought he could see right through me, to the lies, the fake name, the secret notebook under my pillow. But then he gave a faint smile and brushed past. "Go rest. You've worked hard." I exhaled only after he was gone. That night, as the mansion slept, I slipped back into the hallway again. The study door loomed before me. Locked, of course. But I noticed something I hadn't before, a faint line on the wall beside it, like an outline of a panel. A hidden door. I pressed my palm against it. Nothing happened at first, but then I heard a soft click. The panel shifted slightly inward. My breath caught. I pushed it open and found a narrow passage behind it. Dust. Old shelves. A faint scent of smoke. I raised my flashlight. The beam landed on a series of file boxes stacked neatly on a table. The top one was labeled, "Grant Group. Confidential." My fingers trembled as I opened it. Inside were documents, contracts, and photographs of my father, my mother, our company's boardroom. And there, in the corner, was a letter with my father's handwriting. I knew it instantly. To Ethan Reed. "If you do this, there's no going back." My stomach twisted. What had my father meant? Why had he written to him? A sound behind me froze me in place. A low, steady voice. "Who told you about this room?" The flashlight slipped from my hand. It clattered to the floor, rolling across the tiles. Ethan Reed stood at the entrance, his expression unreadable, gray eyes shadowed in the dim light. He wasn't wearing a suit this time, just a black shirt, sleeves rolled up, hair slightly mussed. I opened my mouth, but no words came out. He stepped closer, gaze flicking from the open box to me. "You've been lying to me, haven't you?" My throat went dry. I wanted to say no, to play innocent. But standing there, surrounded by the ghosts of my family's downfall, I couldn't pretend anymore. "Yes," I whispered. His jaw tightened. "Who are you really, Valerie?" The name suddenly felt too heavy. Too fake. I met his eyes, forcing myself to stand tall even though my legs were shaking. "I'm the girl whose life you destroyed," I said quietly. "My real name is Valeria Grant." Silence filled the air like a storm waiting to break. Ethan didn't move. His expression didn't change. But something flickered in his eyes. Shock, guilt, maybe even pain. And in that moment, I wasn't sure which one of us had just lost control. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between Ethan and me was thick enough to choke on. The flashlight lay on the floor, its beam cutting across his face. It made him look older, sharper, more dangerous, and strangely human. He exhaled slowly. "Valeria Grant," he said, testing the name like it was foreign on his tongue. "I should have known." I clenched my fists. "No, you shouldn't have. You don't notice the people you destroy." His expression flickered, almost pained, before it hardened again. "You think I wanted to ruin your family?" I laughed bitterly. "You didn't have to want it. You signed the papers. You smiled for the press. That was enough." He stepped closer. "You have no idea what really happened, do you?" I felt my pulse quicken. "I know that my father lost everything. I know that your company took our assets, our reputation, our future." Ethan's voice dropped. "And I know your father came to me first." That stopped me. "What?" He nodded slowly, eyes never leaving mine. "He asked me for help, Valeria. The Grant Group was already drowning in debt. I offered a merger to save it. He refused, then signed it over when he realized the alternative was bankruptcy." I shook my head. "No, that's not true." "It is." He took a step closer, his voice quiet but firm. "I didn't destroy your family's company. I kept it alive, for a while. But by the time I came in, it was already falling apart." My thoughts spun. It didn't make sense. My father had always been careful, proud. How could he have hidden that from me? You're lying, I whispered. Am I? He said softly. Then tell me, Valeria. Why did your father write me this? He held up the letter I'd found in the file. His thumb brushed over the words, almost gently. If you do this, there's no going back. The words echoed in my mind again. Sharper now. Maybe they hadn't meant betrayal. Maybe they'd meant desperation. I wanted to scream, to accuse, to run. But something in Ethan's eyes stopped me. Guilt. Pain. Something real. I didn't tell the world about your father's debts, he continued quietly. I buried them. I thought it would give him time to recover. Then why did you take everything? I demanded. His jaw tightened. Because he asked me to. The words hit harder than any slap. He didn't want your family's name dragged through scandal, Ethan said. He wanted a clean exit. I promised to keep it quiet. I thought I was helping. I stumbled back, gripping the edge of the table. No. You're lying. He didn't answer. Just stood there, the weight of the past pressing down between us. I looked down at the file, at the letter, at the proof I'd come here searching for, and hated what I found. The truth wasn't clean. It wasn't black or white. It was gray, just like his eyes. Why didn't you tell me? I said, voice trembling. Why didn't you tell anyone? Because it wasn't my story to tell, he replied. And because you already hated me. For a moment, neither of us breathed. The silence felt raw, almost intimate. Finally, Ethan sighed. You shouldn't be here. If the board finds out who you really are. I straightened. Let them. I'm done hiding. He studied me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Fine. But if you stay, you'd better be ready for what comes next. What's that supposed to mean? Your father's company isn't the only thing that's been targeted. His tone darkened. Someone's been coming after me too. Leaking documents. Setting me up. If you're going to dig for the truth, Valeria, you might find something uglier than you expected. My breath caught. You're saying someone else was involved? Ethan met my gaze. I'm saying we both have enemies in this house. A chill ran down my spine. The house suddenly felt smaller, its silence more dangerous. For the first time since I entered that mansion, revenge didn't feel like enough. I didn't just want answers. I needed the truth. And if Ethan Reed was right, then I wasn't the only one living behind a mask. The night after Ethan found me in the secret room, I didn't sleep. Not even for a second. I lay in my narrow bed, staring at the cracked ceiling of the servants' quarters, the words echoing over and over in my mind. Your father came to me first. We both have enemies in this house. At dawn, I got up, changed into my uniform, and went back to work like nothing had happened. But inside, everything had changed. I wasn't just a maid anymore. I was a spy inside enemy territory. And maybe the man I thought was my enemy wasn't the real one after all. The mansion was strangely busy that morning. Men in suits walked through the halls, speaking in low tones. I caught a few words: audit, shares, leak. Ethan moved among them, calm and composed, as if nothing could shake him. But I noticed the tension in his shoulders, the tightness in his jaw. He caught my eye once, across the foyer. It was only a glance, but it felt like a silent message. Be careful. After breakfast service, I slipped into the kitchen to get some air. That's when a hand grabbed my wrist. Valerie. It was Anna, one of the senior maids. She was small and soft-spoken, always humming while she worked. But her grip was surprisingly firm. You shouldn't wander near the West Wing anymore, she whispered. There are cameras now. And rumors. I frowned. What kind of rumors? Her eyes darted toward the door before she leaned closer. Someone's been saying you're not who you say you are. That you came here for something else. My stomach dropped. Who said that? She hesitated, then shook her head. I didn't hear it directly. But Mr. Lawson, the manager, was talking to one of the guards. Be careful, Valerie. People disappear from this place when they ask too many questions. Her words lingered long after she left. So it wasn't just Ethan who suspected me. The whole house was starting to whisper. That evening, after everyone went to bed, I decided to take a risk. If there were enemies in this mansion, I needed to know who they were. I crept toward the study again, but this time, I didn't go inside. I just listened. Voices drifted from beyond the door. "Reed doesn't know yet," a man said. "But he's losing control. Once the press gets those files, he's done." A pause. "And the girl? She won't be a problem. The manager's watching her. If she steps out of line, we'll deal with her quietly." My blood ran cold. Who were they talking about, me? Or someone else? Suddenly, the door handle turned. I froze. Heart hammering. The door opened, and I pressed myself into the shadows just as two men walked out. One of them was Mr. Lawson, the mansion's manager. I'd never liked him. Too polite, too perfect, always smiling like he knew everyone's secrets. Now I understood why. As soon as they disappeared down the hall, I ran the other way, straight into Ethan. He grabbed my shoulders to steady me. "Valeria." I looked up, gasping. "Your manager, Lawson. He's working against you. He's planning to leak something." For a second, I thought he wouldn't believe me. But instead of questioning, his expression darkened. "I know," he said quietly. "That's why I told you to be careful." "You knew." "I've been trying to find proof for weeks. Lawson's connected to the board members who pushed for your father's merger." My breath caught. "You mean the same people who destroyed the Grant Group?" Ethan nodded grimly. "Yes. And they're coming for me next." He looked at me then, not like an enemy, but like an equal. "I need your help, Valeria." The word stunned me. "You want me to help you?" "Yes. You know how they think. You know what they did to your family. If we work together, we can expose them." For a long moment, I couldn't answer. This was the man I'd sworn to ruin. The man I blamed for everything. But when I looked into his eyes, I didn't see the arrogant CEO I'd imagined. I saw someone fighting the same war I was, just from the other side. "All right," I said finally, my voice steady. "We do it my way." His lips curved faintly. "Your way." "Yes," I said, stepping closer. "No board meetings. No lawyers. No more hiding. We take them down from the inside." Ethan studied me for a second before nodding. "Then I guess we're allies now." I didn't trust him, not yet. But as we stood there in the dim hallway, surrounded by secrets and shadows, I realized something strange. For the first time since I walked into that mansion, I wasn't alone. And that scared me more than anything. If someone had told me a month ago that I'd be plotting with Ethan Reed, the man I once swore to destroy, I would have laughed. But here I was, standing in his private study after midnight, going through files together like two thieves sharing the same heist. He'd poured us both coffee, though mine sat untouched on the table. I couldn't relax around him yet. The air between us was tense, heavy with things unspoken. "Lawson's been feeding the board confidential data," Ethan said, eyes on the laptop screen. "Mostly financial reports and project plans. But I think he's also holding something more personal. Something about you." I stiffened. "About me?" He nodded. "He knows your real name, Valeria. He's keeping quiet for now, but that won't last." My chest tightened. "How long have you known?" "Since last week," he admitted. "I found out after you started asking questions. I didn't tell you because I wanted to see how far he'd go." "You mean you used me as bait?" His jaw flexed. "I needed proof." I scoffed. "You're unbelievable." "I'm alive," he said simply. "That counts for something in this business." I wanted to argue, but he wasn't wrong. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was survival. I crossed my arms. "So what's your plan?" He looked up then, and the weight of his gaze made my pulse skip. "We make a deal," he said. "With each other?" He nodded. "You want to clear your family's name. I want to keep my company from being destroyed. Lawson and the board are the key to both. If we can expose them together, you get the truth, and I keep control." It sounded simple, too simple. "And what happens after that?" I asked. "We shake hands and walk away?" Something unreadable passed through his eyes. "Maybe. If that's what you want." The silence between us stretched. The only sound was the faint hum of the city outside the glass wall. Finally, I said, "Fine. But if you betray me..." He cut me off with a faint smile. "You'll ruin me." "I know." Over the next few days, we worked in secret. It was dangerous, exhausting, and strangely thrilling. Ethan showed me how to access hidden company records, and I taught him how to trace digital footprints, skills I'd learned while trying to rebuild what was left of my father's name. We spent hours together, often too close, too quiet. One night, as we sat at his desk reviewing files, my hand brushed his. I pulled away instantly, but he didn't move. His voice dropped to a whisper. "You're not afraid of me anymore." I forced a laugh. "Who says I'm not? You used to flinch every time I walked into a room." "That was before I realized you're just a man," I said, glancing up. "Not a monster." He smiled faintly, and something warm flickered in his eyes. "Careful, Valeria. You might start liking me." I wouldn't go that far. But the truth was, I didn't hate him anymore. And that scared me more than anything Lawson could do. 3 nights later, we got what we needed. Ethan managed to intercept an encrypted message between Lawson and one of the board members. It contained payment logs, offshore accounts, and a list of forged documents, all designed to frame Ethan for fraud and force him out of his company. And at the bottom of the message was a name I hadn't expected to see. Grant Holdings. My father's company. "Why is my family's name here?" I demanded. Ethan's face darkened. "Because they used your father's old accounts to launder their money. They didn't just ruin the Grant Group, they used it as a shield." My stomach turned. "So they destroyed us to hide their own crimes." He nodded grimly. "Yes. And now they're trying to finish the job, with both of us." I stared at the screen, fury burning in my chest. For years, I'd blamed Ethan. Hated him. But the real enemy had always been hiding behind him. I met his gaze. "We end this. Together." His voice was low. "Agreed." For the first time, we weren't enemies or allies. We were something in between, 2 broken pieces of the same story, trying to make it whole again. Ethan closed the laptop and leaned back. "If we do this, there's no turning back." I looked at him steadily. "There never was." He smiled faintly. "Then it's a deal." He extended his hand. I hesitated only a second before taking it. His grip was firm, warm, steady. A deal sealed in shadows. A partnership that shouldn't exist. And deep down, I knew that when this was over, one of us would have to walk away. A week later, the mansion buzzed with tension. Staff rushed from one corridor to another, arranging decorations, polishing glass, checking every light fixture twice. Ethan Reed was hosting the annual Reed Enterprises Gala, the biggest event of the year. Every investor, journalist, and elite socialite in the city would be there, including the people who had destroyed my family. The irony wasn't lost on me. I had entered this mansion as a maid, and tonight I'd be walking through its ballroom as the ghost of the woman I used to be. Valeria Grant, the heir they'd tried to erase. The plan was dangerous, almost reckless. But it was the only way. Ethan and I had agreed to leak the truth during the gala, projecting the files we'd uncovered onto the main screen when the media was present. The evidence would expose the corruption in the board, Lawson's betrayal, and the fake transactions that led to my family's downfall. It was poetic justice. If it worked. The hours before the gala passed in a blur. I spent the afternoon in my room, staring at the gown Ethan had arranged for me. Silk the color of midnight. Elegant. Simple. Too beautiful for someone like me, or at least, the version of me I'd been pretending to be. A knock on the door startled me. "Come in," I said softly. Ethan stepped inside, wearing a charcoal suit and that quiet kind of confidence that didn't need to be announced. He paused when he saw me, his eyes briefly widening. "You look like someone I'm not?" I finished. His lips twitched. "Like someone they should never have underestimated." The compliment caught me off guard. I turned away to hide the warmth creeping up my neck. He adjusted his cufflinks, his tone more serious now. "Remember, once the files go live, Lawson and the board will panic. Security might step in. You need to stay close to me until it's over." I met his eyes. "You think I can't handle them?" "I think you shouldn't have to handle them alone." Something in the way he said it made my chest tighten. It wasn't just strategy anymore. It was concern. And that scared me far more than the plan itself. By the time the first guests arrived, the mansion had transformed. Crystal chandeliers glimmered like stars. Champagne flowed. The scent of roses and expensive perfume hung in the air. I stood at the top of the staircase, watching as people I'd once known laughed below me. Investors, executives, men and women who had shaken my father's hand and then stabbed him in the back. And among them was Mr. Lawson, smiling as if he owned the world. Ethan appeared beside me. "You ready?" I nodded, forcing the tremor from my hands. "Let's end this." We descended together, step by step, into the storm. It started perfectly. Music, toasts, laughter. Then, as the lights dimmed for Ethan's speech, I slipped away toward the control booth. The technician, a quiet man Ethan trusted, handed me a small flash drive. "All set," he murmured. I took a deep breath and inserted it into the computer. A countdown appeared on the screen. 3 minutes. 3 minutes until everything went public. But before I could move away, a familiar voice whispered behind me. "Valeria Grant." I froze. Lawson stood there, smiling that polite, deadly smile. "I thought I recognized you," he said softly. "I knew the maid act was too perfect." I clenched my fists. "You ruined my family. You think you can do the same to me?" "Oh, my dear," he said with a chuckle. "Your father ruined himself. You just inherited his bad decisions." The timer ticked down. 1 minute and 40 seconds. Lawson leaned closer. "You don't know what you're dealing with. That data? You think it will save you? It'll destroy Reed first. And you along with him." I glared at him. "Then we burn together." He reached for the keyboard. I reacted faster. Years of anger and fear erupted all at once. I shoved him back, hitting the switch that locked the control booth door. His fist slammed against the glass. "You'll regret this." "Maybe. But not tonight." The timer hit 0. And then, all at once, the ballroom's giant screen flickered, then filled with documents, emails, signatures. Every secret the board had buried. Every crime tied to Lawson and his partners. Gasps echoed through the hall. Cameras flashed. The whispers turned into chaos. Ethan's voice cut through it all, calm and steady. "These," he said into the microphone, "are the truths that powerful men tried to hide." People turned to look at me as I stepped out from the booth, my head held high. "Valeria Grant," someone whispered. "But she's supposed to be gone," I said quietly. "Not tonight." The reporters swarmed. Lawson tried to push through the crowd, shouting denials, but it was too late. The evidence was everywhere. Ethan found me in the middle of the chaos. His tie was loosened, his expression unreadable, but his eyes were full of something I hadn't seen before. Relief. Pride. "You did it," he said softly. "We did it," I wanted to say. But the words caught in my throat. Because as the flashing lights of the cameras surrounded us, I realized something terrible. We had won the battle. But we'd just made enemies powerful enough to destroy us both. The next morning, the world had changed. Headlines screamed across every news outlet. Reed Enterprises scandal. Inside the corporate cover-up. Missing heiress returns. Valeria Grant exposes corruption. My name. My face. My story. After years of silence, the world finally remembered me. But the victory didn't feel like triumph. It felt like the calm before an even bigger storm. By noon, the mansion was surrounded by reporters and security. The board was in chaos. Some members had resigned overnight. Others were trying to claim innocence. Lawson was arrested early that morning. The sight of him in handcuffs should have satisfied me, but instead, all I felt was exhaustion. When I came downstairs, Ethan was already there, sleeves rolled up, speaking to his legal team. He looked like he hadn't slept either. He dismissed them when he saw me. "You should have stayed upstairs," he said quietly. I managed a tired smile. "Reporters don't scare me." "They should." His tone was sharp, but the worry underneath was real. "They'll twist your story, Valeria. Turn you into the villain if it sells more clicks." I crossed my arms. "Then let them. At least now I'm a villain who fights back." That almost made him smile. Almost. He poured 2 cups of coffee and handed me one. You're trending worldwide, you know. Wonderful, I muttered, taking a sip. Every heiress dreams of becoming a scandal headline. He leaned against the counter, studying me for a moment. I meant what I said last night, he said softly. You were brave. I looked away. Compliments from Ethan Reed were dangerous. They sounded too sincere, like they carried meanings I wasn't ready to face. We both took risks, I said. Now we deal with the consequences. By afternoon, the investigation had moved fast. Authorities raided the board's offices and seized documents. The news kept looping footage of me standing beside Ethan at the gala, our names linked together in every headline. And while the world watched the empire tremble, another kind of pressure started to grow between us. We were no longer enemies. But we weren't free either. Late that night, after the reporters had gone and the house was quiet again, I found Ethan in the library. He was sitting by the fire, his tie gone, the light catching on the tired lines around his eyes. Couldn't sleep? He asked when I entered. I shook my head. Too loud out there. He gestured to the seat across from him. Then sit. It's quieter in here. I hesitated before sitting. The silence between us was different now. No longer hostile, but heavy with something fragile. You'll rebuild, I said after a moment. You always do. He looked into the fire. Maybe. But this time, it'll cost me everything I built to protect. The company? He shook his head. My reputation. My peace. Maybe even my freedom, if they twist it the right way. I stared at him. You knew this could happen, and you still went through with it. His eyes met mine. You did too. We didn't say the rest out loud. How we'd both chosen truth over safety, and how it had tied our fates together whether we wanted it or not. I'm leaving tomorrow, I said quietly. Reporters will move on once I disappear again. He looked away. And go where? I don't know yet. But I can't stay here. Not after everything. He was silent for a long time, then said softly, You don't have to disappear anymore, Valeria. I smiled faintly. It's what I'm good at. He stood then, walking toward me. For a heartbeat, we were too close, the kind of closeness that made breathing feel difficult. If you leave, he said quietly, at least don't disappear without saying goodbye. I looked up at him, and for the first time, I saw the man behind the name. The tired eyes, the weight of guilt, the quiet strength. I'll try, I whispered. We stood there, caught in that fragile moment that balanced between past and future, revenge and forgiveness. But some things couldn't be undone. And some goodbyes couldn't be spoken out loud. So I turned first. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Valeria. That night I packed my things, the same small suitcase I'd arrived with, though now it carried something heavier than clothes. It carried the truth. The next morning, I left before sunrise. The sky was pale, the air still. As the mansion disappeared behind me, I felt both lighter and lonelier than I'd ever been. Maybe one day, I'd see him again. Maybe not. But as I walked down the quiet road, the wind carrying the faint scent of cedar and coffee, I realized something simple and painful. I'd come to that house to destroy Ethan Reed. Instead, I'd found the only person who ever truly saw me. And that was the kind of victory that never felt like winning. Freedom didn't look the way I imagined. It wasn't a grand return to the world, or headlines celebrating justice. It was quiet. Too quiet. A small apartment on the edge of the city, the hum of traffic outside my window, and a silence that sometimes felt heavier than the mansion's walls ever did. For weeks after the gala, my days blurred together. Reporters camped outside my building at first, then slowly lost interest when the next scandal came along. The news cycle moved on. People forgot, except me. Ethan's name still appeared on the financial pages sometimes. Reed Enterprises rebuilding under new leadership. Ethan Reed temporarily steps down amid investigation. I didn't reach out. I didn't dare. We'd both made our choices that night. He'd faced the fallout, and I'd vanished again, just like I promised I would. But even after everything, I couldn't forget him. Sometimes I'd wake in the middle of the night, remembering the way he'd said my name. Quietly, carefully, like it mattered. Other times I'd wonder if he ever thought about me at all, or if I'd just become another chapter in his list of lessons learned the hard way. One afternoon, Nearly 2 months later, a letter arrived. No sender's name. Just my address written in neat, familiar handwriting. I almost didn't open it. But curiosity won. Inside was a single line. There's a place you should see. Tomorrow. 8 p.m. ER. Below it was an address. An art gallery downtown. For the rest of the day, I tried to convince myself not to go. I'd already said goodbye. What good could come from reopening the wound? And yet, when the clock struck 7:30, I found myself standing in front of the mirror, staring at my reflection. The woman looking back wasn't the scared maid anymore, or the broken heiress. She was something in between. Someone still learning how to be whole again. I sighed, grabbed my coat, and went. The gallery was small but elegant, softly lit with gold light. The crowd was thin, patrons murmuring about brushstrokes and composition. I almost turned back when I saw him. Ethan stood near the far wall, dressed simply in a dark shirt and coat. He looked older, maybe thinner, but his eyes, those same gray eyes, found me immediately. "Valeria," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Ethan." My voice came out steadier than I felt. "You're a hard man to find. So are you." He gestured toward a painting hanging beside him. It wasn't abstract or expensive looking, just a quiet landscape. A lake at dawn, soft colors fading into mist. "Your father painted this," he said quietly. "I found it in storage when they turned over the old grant accounts. I thought you'd want it." My breath caught. I stepped closer, tracing the brushstrokes with my eyes. My father's signature was there in the corner. Faint, almost hidden. "I didn't even know this existed," I whispered. "He kept it in his office," Ethan said. Said it reminded him of hope. "I thought you should have it." For a moment, I couldn't speak. The anger I'd carried for so long felt small beside the weight of what he'd done. Not just giving me a painting, but giving me back a piece of my past. "Thank you," I said softly. He nodded, his gaze gentle but tired. "I'm leaving the city, Valeria. For a while. The board forced me out permanently this time. I think I need the distance." I looked at him, feeling that same ache in my chest I'd felt the day I walked away. "So this is goodbye," I said. He smiled faintly. "Maybe just, see you later." The silence stretched between us again, fragile and full of everything we couldn't say. "Ethan," I said finally, "do you regret it? Any of it?" He looked at the painting instead of me. "Not the truth. And not you." Something inside me cracked at that. I wanted to reach for him. To tell him I wasn't angry anymore. That maybe, just maybe, we'd both save something that night. Even if it wasn't ourselves. But all I said was, "Goodbye, Ethan." He turned toward me, his expression unreadable, and then smiled. The kind of smile that said he understood. "Goodbye, Valeria." I walked out before I could change my mind, the cool night air wrapping around me as the door closed behind me. When I looked back, the gallery lights glowed softly in the distance, reflected in the wet streets like stars. Freedom, I realized, wasn't about forgetting or running. It was about finally being able to walk away without hate. And maybe that was enough. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more original novel stories. And stay tuned, our next story is coming soon.